How's it going, everybody, and welcome to another video on the intermediate React, aka how to write production grade React application. So in today's video I'm going to focus on the Redux dev tool as a way to understand what this tool does for you, what these things allow us to do that. I am quite familiar with. I just want to know is, or in my case, I want to expand is my vocabulary when it comes to describe what this Redux dev tool is doing. And this is part of a course taught by Brian Holt, a software engineer that has previously worked with Netflix, Reddit, Microsoft, Snowflakes, and currently he's the VP of product at SQLite Cloud. So this course is focused on looking at techniques and tools that allows to write those production grade React application. Okay, techniques like code splitting, server-side rendering, testing, as well as transitions, and tools like Tailwind, TypeScript, and Redux, which is exactly what is this all about in today's video. So okay, we got this Redux. Okay, so we're gonna make a quick recap about Redux. So we went through this because in the early days of React, we don't have a way to how to store the app level state, and that's why we need to rely on third-party service or libraries. In this case, Redux or Mux or any other. All right. So Redux becomes very, very popular by their mechanism and how they actually allow us to make this state management. And it is readable, quite verbose, but it's testable and debuggable, which is three qualities that I love from any application, especially if you're writing or reading code. Can I read this? Is this debuggable? Is this testable? Now, but because React causes us to not need to use Redux any longer, because now we have something called like context. Initially, actually, that was pretty bad and horrible, but now is better, as well as some functions like use reducer for that. So now Redux becomes quite superfluous, even though the idea of Redux is that you have an state or a store that you want to store all of your app level state data. App level state data, for example, if you're building an e-commerce like products, user, orders, catalog, okay? And then you have is the state, the UI state. So for example, is this disabled or not? Is this active or not? Are you showing this model or not? That kind of logic. So why do we use Redux? Okay, because with Redux we have now the ability to look at the state change, and if you have now a tool that allows you to debug and test all of these different state changes that happen, you're going to eliminate an entire class of bugs that your app will run into. And that's exactly what we did, or particularly what I did here. So understanding is Redux as a way to say, hey, you know what, I don't need to use Redux. That's a good use case. All right, that's the reason why we're looking here at Redux. We look at the anatomy, aka what are the libraries that we need to install. So you have is the toolkit that make our life much more easy. It's less verbose. Okay, so we have toolkit, the Redux toolkit, the React Redux, which is the glue with React use to work with Redux. And then we need to know how to use it. That's why we have first defined your store by saying, hey, RT key, a shorthand for Redux toolkit. Hey, RT key, I want you to now create or configure is a store here. And this store at the beginning, it will only have Reducer by default, right? Empty Reducer. We don't have any of that. So the idea here is that we're going to put all of our states here, all of our slice, because there is a concept here that comes from Redux, some called like slice, that allows to bundle all of our states in a particular file and then connect that to our store. So you can pretty much think, this is an imperfect analogy, but you can think of Redux as some sort of database when you dispatch actions. Okay, so when you dispatch or query actions to your database. Again, I don't want to run too far here with that, but it's okay. And then we define our slice, something that I'm quite familiar with, especially when you need to tell to Redux, hey, this is a slice. The way you do that is by, well, creating a slice. Okay, so I want you to create a slice where there you're going to define is the name, something very, very important because it's going to be used by Redux to for internal consistency of the name of the slide. It's a way to keep track of those state chains and where and from where it comes from. Okay, you have a slice. Then we have, on the create slide, we define the name, we define the initial value, as well as the reducer. And here, when you're going to define is the logic that you want is to mutate. What will be is the state change that you want to perform. And because Redux has a particular way or particularly RT key, give us a convenient little things here because it's doing some sort of black magic out there or behind the scenes. And what it's doing is to save us time to do repeated and monotonous tasks. So that's what we need to export is our actions from the slice actions. Okay, in our case from the pet slice, from the actions. Okay, and what it's doing behind the scenes is to creating is our functions where we're going to export is or return the type which contains the action as well as the payload. All right, so because this is something that can become very tedious anytime you write this for any mutation you want to perform. It's like quite obvious that RTK here is helping us with that, but it's important to know what they are doing. Okay, so then we export our reducers, and this is just to define a slice. How can we make use of this? First, we need to we need to notify Redux, hey, this is a slice. Cool, we already did that by importing the reducers. Okay, and next question is, okay, so how can we read or write about it? How can I pull data out of this and then store it? So to store data, we use dispatch from the React Redux, where we're gonna pass is the action, okay, and the data for that. So this is the way of how you can store data globally here with Redux. Okay, but how can I read data out of this? Well, we use then is use selector for that. A keyword or something important to mention is keyword, by the way, or use selector. The function that you pass to your selector is actually a subscription, because what you're doing is to say, hey, whatever that chain or whatever that property or that state change, I want to now render the component, because Redux by looking at that state on your Redux store, it say, hey, this changed, so now I need to re-render this component where it was called. So if your components, and here is when complexity here, and that's another reason, especially when you have abstractions. Abstractions is the enemy of good maintainable code, as long as you understand that. If you don't understand that, even though it can become quite hard to maintain. So that's exactly what it's doing. So the thing, the TLDR is that only fetch the necessary data, only fetch the bare minimum data from that. Okay? Only fetch the necessary data from that. Only pull out, do not pull unnecessary data. Only link the bare minimum data for that. Because otherwise you are forcing to do re-renders anytime that object, and the more property it has, the worse it will be. So this is can be one of the performance issues that you can look in a couple applications out there. Sometimes you might or not, okay? But it's important to understand that. Okay, so then now we look at, okay, but how can now we fetch data from our servers? Okay, how can we make that happen? And that's when we look at the RTKey query. So this RTKey query, what it's gonna do is to allow us to do data fetching and caching. You can also do some server side or to sync with the server state. It is quite there are better alternatives for that, like React Query, for example. So the idea of looking at this, the idea of looking at RTKey query is that you know how is doing behind the scenes, what are the concept or the value that you can get from this, so you don't need to use it. Essentially. So with that, we need to create now, if we want to now fetch some data, we need to create our services. So these services where you're going to create our API functions that come from the toolkit React Query. And it's important to understand this, because what this function does is to generate queries or to generate hooks per endpoints. So whenever that change, or whenever a state change in our endpoints, we're going to reflect that. We're going to get the latest data from that. So again, the idea here is that also it comes with some convenience functions for data loading. Okay, for showing or for having this logic of loading data in our components. So that's great. That's cool. Okay, with create API. So how can we now create these endpoints here? How can we start defining our service that talk to the API? first in the Redux ecosystem. So first you get the create API that comes from the toolkit query React, where you're going to pass is the Redux path as a way to let Redux do mapping for internal use, for internal consistency. Okay, hey, this servers is now mapping. We're gonna map this to this Redux path. Okay. So pretty much like you can look at the Reduxer store like a hash table or like a dictionary. So here's whole the key is all of this name, okay, and the value is a bunch of functions that you want to perform based on those Reduxer. So you can think of this as giving this namescape or namespace for a key. All right, so now we look at how can we define is our service, create API, we pass the Reduxer path, then we define is the base query, where you can, as you can imagine, you can define several endpoints that you can talk to per service. So here we just define is one endpoint or one URL, okay, and then your endpoints, where here is going to take a function called the builder, and this function is gonna do the magic here by adding is this nice little functions and generate is these hooks per endpoint. So we got is this, right? So we use the builder.query. We pass to the query is an object that is the query, which is, hey, this is, for example, get one query. Hey, this is the ID, and this is the thing that I want you to return, which is the name of the path or the resource, okay, as well as the pattern. Cool, so far so cool. And then we could, and then I look at the transform response. Hey, this is after you get the data, okay, after you wait for that promise. Now I want you to return this. So the funny thing is this, okay, because remember, after all, create API is allowing us to generate is hooks per endpoints, as well as some convenient UI loading state or data. Okay, for example, is loading. So anytime you define an endpoint, you must define is the use, which is the custom hook, followed by their name and the query. Okay. This is something that we did for our pet API, as well as the breed or search patterns. And then when you now to notify the Reduxer or to the store, you say, hey, I'm gonna pass you is the Reduxer dot or the name of the service and the Reduxer path followed by the Reduxer here. So that's basically what we did here with our store. So Redux now is able to store all of this slice, okay, and make it very testable here, as well as our service. So where are we going to hit? And then if we want to enable catching, enable catching and polling, that kind of features, you use a concept called middleware, where now middleware is something that you want to do in the middle before doing the operation. So for example, this is useful when you want to you dispatch an action to your Reduxer, but you want to change the shape of the object to create a new object. That's good. Or you want to use Redux with observables, and then you want to intercept any observables, do something about it, and then dispatch the action to that. So this is just a couple examples of what is the usability or the use case or of our middlewares in Redux. You can also define things like errors in Redux and then send that to the server. Okay, similar like what you do in Express application. When you define it's a middleware to do some error logging. But in our case, we're doing this. Okay. And now, then I look at how you can wire everything here so you're going to fetch your data properly. Because we're using is custom hooks. And those custom hooks were, those custom hooks with use effects are performing this side effects, which is the API. Okay. Now we were using is how do you put it? Yeah, we were using is the so we were using is these custom hooks, and now the way how we can use that is using the pet service or those servers that we use that we create using is the create API, and then on those custom hooks or effects, we say, hey, I want you now to get me is the particular endpoint where when you destructure that like this, okay, this is the convenient function that it gives to you, okay, and that to me is something interesting, by the way. So you can say, hey, the data is now called breeds, okay, and this is where we're going to send that, okay. You can also pass some optional parameters when you're going to use your custom hook, okay, generated by the RTK query service, your create API. That makes a lot of sense. And then you say, okay, now give it to me if that exists, okay, or well, give it give it an empty array, okay, as well as this nice little convenient feature here. And this is when you can be more specific with your loading state, okay. Is this loading? Is this pending? That kind of thing. So the TLDR of use in looking at the RTK, RTK with the RTK with Redux, the RTK query, in contrast with React query, is that great. With React query, we can now is to define our endpoints. Very straightforward. We can do data fetching and catching, which is great. But for things like server-side rendering or keeping the state in sync or updated with the server, they're better alternative. React query can do that because React query says, here is a key, here is a URL, here is a refetch method. That's quite interesting. That's very, very interesting. And then now today we're going to take a look at the Redux dev tool. Yeah, let's
One last thing that I wanted to show you. Let's go back to the notes here, and we're going to go down to Redux here at the Redux DevTools. So I left you a link here. Go in Redux here at the Redux DevTools. So I left you a link here. Go install the Redux DevTools. I'll have a link here for Firefox and for Chrome. I think I have to go install it for Chrome, so let me go do that really quick.
Yeah, I don't have that as well. Redux. Yeah, I don't have that as well. Redux DevTool. Okay, but this is on Firefox. Yeah, that's right. Redux DevTool. That's right. Cool. Timor Metusale. Okay. You can see a screenshot of that. How that work here. Come on, for real? Really? Nah, you think you're funny? What? Did I close it? Add, please. Exactly. What? Oh my god. So yep. This is an image of how you can use that. Let's return that. Okay. And then because we already have our application up and running, we can take a look at this. Yep, and here we are. Good. So let me now open the thing here. Where is it, man? Redux. There you got it. Okay, cool. Oh, cool.
So I'm going to click Add to Chrome here.
Let me also add that to Chrome. Yep. Yep, let me also add that to Chrome here. React DevTools for that. Cool. Oh, no, but it's Redux. Sorry. Redux DevTools for that again. Developer friendly service, Redux DevTool, blah blah blah. Exactly. So add to Chrome here. There you got it. Okay. All right, that's cool. We also add that to our Chrome browser.
Okay, that's been added here. And now if I refresh my page, I should have in here Redux pane. So I'm going to click on that. This is probably one of the other most compelling parts about Redux.
Compelling. This is one of the most compelling thing about Redux. Compelling. Compelling. It's more compelling. It's convenient. It's compelling. It's convenient. It's compelling. Yeah. Oh, great.
Because I can actually see everything happening inside of my Redux via this, right? So right now I'm looking at all the actions that are coming in.
Exactly. Exactly. This is one of the most compelling things about Redux is that we can now look at what state change and do time travel debugging.
You can see all of these various different actions that are coming in from Pet API. These are generated by Redux Toolkit.
So in our example here, these are generated by React. Okay. Pet API config middleware register executed query pending and executed query for fail. Exactly, because now we are indeed calling here and we are subscribed to this object. In the Pet API, as you can see, you gotta get this. These initial states are equal. Okay, initial state. These are generated by RTKey. RTKey. For example, config and middleware. The next thing here, executing query. Because this is actually generated is on. So what happens when you don't do that? Yeah. What happens when you jump here or you skip here? Exactly. You can do this time travel debugging. So as a way to show is the initial state. That's interesting. So for example, so in our case here, okay, so this is convenient, or this is compelling. So pet, so middleware, exactly. So all of this query or all of this dispatch are generated.
Right now I'm looking at all the actions that are coming in. You can see all of these various different actions that are coming in from Pet API. These are generated by Redux Toolkit.
Exactly. So you can see all of these actions performed this is something generated by React exact React Toolkit. Or the Redux tool. The Redux tool. Exactly. Remember, we are using this React Toolkit, but after all, this is just a framework around Redux, the state management.
So let's say I change this to be dog. That's going to dispatch an action. Actually, it won't. Oh, will it? It does. Okay.
So for example, if we now take a look at the dog, it's supposed to dispatch an action. Exactly. Where we're going to look at the breed here. Where you got all of the breed and say, hey, rejected. Text must be a string. Okay.
Yeah, here we go. Oh yeah.
In my case, I get that rejected. Okay, that's interesting. That's quite compelling. So when I did this, okay. You can also do this debugging in real life. So in our search pattern, so when we are doing is this. So in our use breed list, we are now doing this. Okay, and it tells us that no, it fails, my friend. It says the dog that we're passing to our pet API service here, we just get breed or animal URL breed, and as you can see here, actually is doing that. Okay, it's constructing in sending the request, but our server say, hey, this is a bad request. So you must provide an animal parameter in the query string. That's interesting. On the patterns. Okay, it's like we're not passing any data there from the search patterns, which is not true. We in fact are passing is animal here. Okay. All right. So when we are doing is this. Okay. Okay. Use search query data pets here. The problem is with our use breed list as a way to fetch all of these breeds per animal. Okay, animal here, breeds, and is loading, and for some reason, okay, that custom hub is telling us, hey, no, you can't do that. Question is that breeds in plural or in singular? You're actually sending the animal properly. Exactly, it's a bad request. It's a malformed request. Okay, can I go to them to see how to do that? To look at the API for that? Your function 4.0 app is up and running. And they're using is Microsoft Azure. The Azure function for that? Yeah, but let me see how is.
Because it's changing the breed. So it executes that, and you see fulfilled, and I can see all the various different actions coming in, right? And if I click submit, you can see it calls search params all, then it does unsubscribing and pending and fulfilled and a bunch of stuff like that. But you can see step by step of what's going on.
Yeah, but in my particular case is because we are now calling to that use breeds query get breeds, okay, where we say, hey, the URL will be breed unless it is in singular. Okay. Let me take a look at all older videos from them.
The next thing that you and I are going to do, call that pet API service together, right? So you can give it this like skip.
Nope. Oh, okay. Makes sense. Is expecting to pass is the animal as an object. Okay, yeah. We didn't send the proper data to the client. Now, when we reload this, it actually is not complaining about it. When we take a look at the Redux, we say, hey, the animal here is dog. He performed that successfully. Okay. We got some malformed, so we make a bad request. That's 400. Cool. And yeah, fulfill, pending, and fulfill. But as you can see here, all of these are generated is by Redux. So all these actions are generated by Redux. Well, you can see during pending what it's doing here. So this is the query, this is the subscription, and then you get now the data as it is. Is that in the status pending? That's right. Until the server reply with the proper data, which this is what you can get. The data, blah blah blah, as an array, and the full field timestamp like that. Same for status, for pending to fulfill. So this is the particular property that you can get from these custom hooks from your endpoint that are generated or that is that are generated by a create API, where you can now define its service here to connect to whatever server you want to or need to, okay, from the Redux toolkit query React, okay. Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm.
How easy was that to create a whole custom hook for one API response? Pretty compelling. We'll do search, builder.
Mm-hmm.
One last thing that I want to. So if I go back here, I can actually click play, and it'll just go at a rate, and I can watch, things playing out in my.
Yep. If you're gonna go and hit play, you can see all of this. In the settings here, no remote connection, use local custom server. Your actions, states, the difference here, trace. You can look at what is going on here, as well as the tests. It actually generates some tests for you, but actually it's not quite. My work for your case. Who knows? Maybe not. Okay. It actually generates some tests for you. You can also play here to do this time travel debugging, right? So initially you don't have this state, and then you play this. Okay. Next thing is this is fulfilled. You can see the data here. Okay. So when you click on that, all right. So when you click on that, it actually is it's fulfilling, but then it rejects some state here for that. Okay, it's like trying to fetch. Makes sense. Okay, it's like we're doing is this. Okay. So far so good. No problem. So here we are saying, hey, I want you to fetch docs here. That's all. Nothing more. Okay. You can also look at the tree chart of what is going on here. Meta, state, base query. So what is the data that you're gonna look at that? How is the payload for that, as well as the meta? Okay. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That makes tons of sense, completely. And this is where you can do this time travel debugging.
time traveling debugging is what that's called. I can always go in and I can see, I can reset things. I can see what the actions looked like. So you can see what was in the payload. This gives me a bunch of meta information of like when did it happen, what was the query, what were the arguments, what was the request ID, did it work, did it not work. One of my favorite things here, so let's go look at one of them that we created, like the search params all one that I did, this one. First of all, you can do things like jump to this one. You can also say, hey, what would happen if this action didn't happen? You can click skip and it'll reapply everything.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You can check things like, or you can ask, or you can ask for, hey, what will happen? Yeah, what will happen if if we skip this action? Okay, we can jump also to where we define that okay, we can jump also where we define, or where the action is being triggered. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool tool, by the way. It's debuggable.
Skip that action.
It's heavily
it's kind of
debuggable,
right? And then another thing here, I can click test. It'll actually generate a test for me that I can just copy and paste into my code, which is pretty cool. I like when my tools write tests for me, right? Now, I'm going to argue this is a ridiculous test. Look at how much stuff it's trying to put into my test. But it's a good starter, right? This is a Jest template, but there's one for Mocha and Tape and Ava. We're about to do vtest for our testing framework. Just use the Jest one if you're doing vtest. There's the state. There's the difference. You can see like what was the delta between the two. So I went from animal to being nothing to being dog.
Mm-hmm. You can see the difference here. Or what is the delta? What is the delta here?
And you can see the actual stack trace to see what led you to calling to that. I've not found a use for that, but that's pretty cool. And that's it.
Yeah, the stack trace. The stack trace to tell you where it was. Look at it. Where it was.
Stack trace to see what led you to calling to that.
To see what led you to call it to that. Stack trace to see you what led you to call to that. Stack trace. What led you to call to that. To see what led you to call to that. Not found useful.
I've not found a use for that, but that's pretty cool.
Not found use of that.
And that's it. So one thing that I have seen people do, which I found very interesting and a compelling use case of what the Redux toolkits can do for you, or just in general Redux. Let's say your user's application crashes, right? What I've seen people do is dump their entire history of Redux, and then they'll send it off to Track.js or Sentry or something like that. You can then take that dump and you can put it into your DevTools, and you can literally go piece by piece of what your user did to cause the crash. So you can literally time travel through your user crashing their application. Pretty cool, right?
Totally pretty cool.
Your user's application people do, which I found very interesting.
Yeah. So use cases. People often do when when a user error happens is to send that to your error tracking service, track.js, Sentry, okay, and then dump that, and then dump that output.
And a compelling use case of what the Redux toolkits can do for you, or just in general Redux. Let's say your users
Which is a compelling case complaint. So people often do, when a user error happens, or when a user, yeah, when, people, yeah, one of the most compelling things about Redux toolkit, Redux dev tool, is that is let's say your app. So let's say your app. So let's say your exactly. Let's say your user app crashes. You can send and what people are doing is to send that output from Redux.
application crashes, right? What I've seen people do is dump their entire
crashes, and what people are doing, what I have seen exactly. So what I have seen in this case, is people dumping the Redux history into any error service, let's say track.js, okay, or Sentry, and then recreate that by importing into Redux.
like history of Redux, and then they'll send it off to track.js or Sentry or something like that. You can then take that dump and you can put it into your dev tools, and you can literally go
Exactly. And then recreate that by importing into Redux. So you can take that dump and put it into your dev tool, and put it into your dev tool.
go piece by piece of what your user did to cause the crash.
And look at piece by piece what the user or what your user did to cause. You can see piece by piece what the user caused, or what the user did to cause your app to crash. Because all of these are real time. Okay, this is runtime errors. If you have TypeScript, you're going to eliminate is runtime errors, not API or network errors, that's when Redux came into place. Okay. Okay.
So you can literally like time travel through your user crashing their application.
Exactly. So you are basically time travel through the user crashing your application. That's pretty compelling. Yeah, that's pretty compelling.
Pretty cool, right? Pretty compelling debugging tools. So, okay. So that's Redux. That's Redux dev tools. If you want deeper dives on this, there's a Redux fundamentals course from Mr. Kinney himself. Strongly suggest that. Yeah.
He's also about to release an advanced Redux using Redux Toolkit.
Oh, even better. So if you want even more advanced stuff on Redux Toolkit itself, check that out as well.
Yeah, and again, all of these were very, very basics. Yeah, all of these were very, very basics. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, you are the creator of that. That's interesting. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. Okay, okay.
Redux using Redux Toolkit.
Oh, even better. So if you want even more advanced stuff on Redux Toolkit itself, check that out as well. If you want to see this exact same scenario that I did, look at this handsome bastard up there.
Yeah, look at this handsome bastard up there. Handsome bastard here. Look at this handsome bastard here. Oh, this is an hour. Okay.
I did teach a raw Redux before, so this is going to go through the exact same pet adoption application with raw Redux. You can do that if you are a glutton for pain. This is so much better than writing raw Redux. But if you want to, it's here. Okay, questions about Redux? I'm hoping the feeling that you have right now is mixed. Some of that was really cool. That was a lot of work. I have mixed feelings about it. If I imparted that to you, I feel like I did my job. If you either like it too much or not at all, I feel like I didn't do it. It's a trade-off, right? There's definitely trade-offs to using Redux. That's really what I want you to see. Okay. Any questions about Redux before we move on?
There's one quick question before
Oh,
we
yeah,
go.
sure. Go ahead.
Could you explain about the action type and when we would use it?
Sure.
Okay.
So let's take a look at our Redux application one more time. We're going to open the DevTools. We're going to go back into Redux. Let's look. So these are what you see here. They're called the Redux action type. Let's look specifically at the search params all, because that was one that you and I made together, right? So if I look at the action here, you can see that there's a type here called search params / all. So just to describe to you where that comes from, it comes from search param slice.
It comes from the slice and the reductor.
It comes from this name, right? So if I call this search params LOL, that would be the name, / the name of the reducer, which is all, right? So that is why this one is search params / all. Search params / all.
Because this is the way of how they can identify from Redux is this is the slice or this bundle and this is the action. So for that, pretty much what you're doing is when you're using use reducer.
So it's generated from the name of the reducer that you have, as well as the name that you gave the slice overall. We used to have to name these action types ourselves, but with Redux Toolkit, it generates those names for us.
Those nodes for us.
What's the point of the type? The type is just so that Redux knows where to send your reducer, like which reducer to send your thing to. That's the entire point of the type. Last section, buckle up. It's the hardest one yet.
All right, last section here. And now we're gonna look at finally, testing. The most loved area. Yep. The most loved things that we do as developer. Okay, testing. Buckle up.
Last section, buckle up.
Okay, so last sections, buckle up. Yep, last section, buckle up. Is the hardest one yet. The hardest one.
It's the hardest one yet. I'm just kidding. It's not. TypeScript was definitely the hardest one yet.
Is the hardest one? Nah, just kidding. TypeScript was the hardest one. Was the hardest one yet.
Maybe Redux. I don't know. That one's kind of up to you.
Or maybe Redux. I don't know. TypeScript, the thing that will be annoying is especially when you started to migrate your files to TypeScript from ESX to TypeScript, because there you are not sure if is that TypeScript is telling you that this is an actual type error, or is that TypeScript is being finicky about it. Okay, it's being defensive. You have to now specify a little bit more. And that's something in practice translate to have to fight with the TypeScript compiler and find a way to say, okay, what is this? What is this? What is all this about? So the more you do that, the less you fight the compiler. This is what TypeScript. And the other is the Redux. Yep, but yeah, the other is with Redux. But with Redux, the thing here is it has a particular way to do state management. When you define your store, a bunch of slides, and those slides actually have this bundle state that we can now access through using selectors, or you can subscribe to that, or you can store the data or change the data by dispatching actions to them. So far so good. And the other is that okay, this is now state management. But what happens when you want is to now fetch data for data fetching or catching? And here is when we use now is our service, the create API. So here, this little function, these little convenient functions that come from Redux Toolkit query React is generate a bunch of custom hooks or hooks for our endpoints, as well as some of the UI relevant data states. So for example, it's loading. And that's something interesting because if your application are running entirely with Redux, so go full into RTK query. The thing that I saw with this is that once you define that, and then you try to work with Redux for this RTK query, which is great for data fetching and catching by using something called a middleware that allows you to actually perform something in the middle before you reach to destination. For example, you want is to change the shape of the objects to another before you dispatching an action, or you might want to use Redux with observables and do something in the middle, so you can later on dispatch a action to your store. And this is just a couple examples here. But when it comes to now do the server side rendering or to sync with server state, okay, do sync or sync and updates, as well as catching, as well as know when the data comes from, how to do that in an efficient way on the server side. When you have this challenge, there are better tools for that. You have React Query for that, and that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. So even though we look at the React DevTool or the Redux DevTools to see that it allows us to do time travel debugging, we can also look at all of the action that is dispatching, as well as the different types action that is dispatching, how all of these are generated by Redux. And when we use the Reducer path, or when we look at our React or Redux DevTool, we can look at the name of the slide followed by the dispatch or the action in there. Okay. We can also look at the diff, the stack trace. It also generates some tests. Might be useful or not. I really like about that my tool generate is tests for me, which is great. And something that I see, and this is one of the most compelling use case for Redux toolkit, is that let's say your user crashes your app, and what I have seen is people dumping their entire Redux history and sending that to any server error login or any error login service like TrackJS or Sentry, and then dump that data into the Redux. So you can see, so you basically now time travel through the user crashing your application. And that's pretty compelling. Again, this can be useful for API errors, Okay, no, not bad requests, but API errors or API malform API response. So you can detect that. But even though for that we can use is error boundary for that. The cool thing of Redux is that it gives us now the entire time travel through the we we get this dump data through the entire time travel things as yeah. So we're basically time travel or time traveling exactly. So we're basically time traveling through the users creating or through the user crashing on app, and that's very compelling. Completely, man. That's interesting.
It's not this one, though. All right. We're going to talk about testing. And I'm going to tell you why I'm a really good person to learn testing from. It's because I don't like testing. I don't like testing. So I try and make my tests really good, and I try and write as few of them as possible so that I can maintain them as well as I can.
Okay. No one. Okay. Keynote here is that being very good at testing, because this is something that I don't like. Okay. So being very good at testing, because this is something that I don't like, by writing the minimal amount of tests. I think this is something. It helps a lot. It helps. It
I don't like
tells you
testing.
pain.
So I try and make my tests really good, and I try and write as few of them as possible so that I can maintain them as well as I can. My least favorite thing in the entire world is flaky tests. If something fails, it
Flaky test. Okay. Okay. So my least favorite thing is a flaky test.
damn well better to be telling me something or it shouldn't have failed. But I hate tests that waste my time. So I'm going to tell you my testing methodology was like, let's write a small core set of very good tests that tell me something. I'm infamous at one of my companies previously for just going in and deleting all the flaky tests. And like, you can't do that. I was like, I'm definitely going to do that. So here we are. At one of my companies previously, write a small core set of very good. My least favorite thing in the entire world is flaky tests. If something fails, it damn well better to be telling me something or it shouldn't have failed.
Mm-hmm.
My least favorite thing in the entire world is flaky tests. If something fails, it damn well better to...
Okay. If something fails, it damn well better to tell me something. It damn well better. If something fails, it damn well better. If something fails, it damn well better to be telling me something. To be telling me something. Or not
be telling me
fail.
something or it shouldn't have failed.
Mm-hmm. Or shouldn't have failed. If something fails, it damn well better it damn well better be telling me something. Especially for these machines or for these tests. If something fails, it better be tell if damn well. If something fails, it damn well better be. If something fails, it damn well better be telling me something or shouldn't have failed.
But I hate tests that waste my time.
Totally, man. But I hate tests that waste my time. I'm not signed for this. And that's one of the reasons why I prefer to dedicate enough time to this, to learn the intrinsic nature of that, to recognize, okay, I need to learn this because this is something that is demand, especially for the shareholders and that kind of thing. So I'm gonna be very good at doing this because this is something that I don't like to do, because I don't want to dedicate time for this. That's what happens. If something fails, it then well better be if something fails, it then well better be telling me something, or shouldn't have failed. But I hate tests that waste my time.
So I'm going to tell you my testing methodology was like, let's.
Mm-hmm. And I love it, man. So Brian Holt is showing us his testing methodology. Oh my God! Yep, go.
Write
bro.
a small core set of very good tests that tell me something.
So let's write core small test that's telling me something. Oh yeah, it is, man.
I'm infamous at one of my companies previously for just going in and deleting all the fake flavors.
I am infamous for going and delete all of the flaky tests.
Flaky test. And like, you can't do that. I was like, I'm definitely going to do that. So here we are. Let's talk about vtest.
Okay.
Every version of this course previously, I think, has used jest. And jest and vtest are really, really similar. The reason why today we're going to use vtest as opposed to jest all previous to this is that vtest is made to go with vt, right? It's made by the same people. And the nice thing about vtest is that it reads from your vt configuration. In other words, we do not have to reconfigure anything. vtest is just going to work out of the box for us. That seems pretty compelling to me. Me personally, if I'm going to be using vt, I'll be using vtest as well. And vtest is meant to be a drop-in replacement for jest.
Mm-hmm. So here we are going to use vtest because it is pretty compelling, since we don't need, exactly, it is pretty compelling since we don't need to, oh my God, to use vtest because it is pretty compelling. Okay, since it is pretty compelling, it is pretty compelling since we don't need to configure. It's pretty compelling because it already works with vt. Since it already works with vt, and it is made to be the replacement of vtest or Jasmine.
So they're meant to be API compatible, which means if you get through this course and you don't like vt and you want to go back to jest and parcel or jest and webpack or something like that, everything that I'm about to teach you applies to jest as well, or Jasmine for that matter. Because jest is based on Jasmine and vtest is based on jest. And I think that the transitive property applies here, that therefore vtest is based. Jest is based on Jasmine.
Mm-hmm. So jest is based on Jasmine, and vtest is based on jest.
And vtest is based on jest. And I think that the transitive property applies here, that therefore vtest is based on Jasmine. And I mean, testing, none of testing is that different, so this all relatively works together. If you really do want to use Jest, just go check out V4 of this course. I used Jest in the last version. A fun side note is that Jest used to be a Facebook product, right? They made Jest to test React applications, and now Jest is actually officially an OpenJS project. So it's no longer a Facebook project. It's actually a full-on open source, community-governed kind of project, which makes me like Jest all the more. Okay, so we're on a brand new copy of Adopt Me on the 14-context, and we're going to be using vtest. So I want you to come in and say npm install -D vtest
A particular
at
version.
0.24.3, and then at testing-library/react at 13.4.0. I guess it's worth mentioning that vtest is made by the same people that make Vite. I think it's probably in the name that you probably guessed that, but they are. And Vite and vtest were made for Vue initially, right? But they work just as well for React. So I have no problems endorsing vtest as a perfectly good way of doing React testing. Let's talk a second about testing library. Testing library was meant to replace something called Enzyme. If you've been writing React long enough, or if you've taken this class previously, you've used Enzyme. That was made by Airbnb as like a bunch of testing helpers for testing React projects. It's a pain in the butt. It's a huge pain in the butt, and I'm very glad that it's gone. Thank you to all the people that made it. It was better than nothing, which is what we had before. But testing library is basically better in every single way. It's less flaky, it's easier to use, it's faster, all the good things. Testing library, it's a bunch of helper functions for testing React applications. You do not use you do not use Enzyme with testing library. They are mutually exclusive. One more thing I need you to install, npm install -D happy DOM, and we're going to do happy DOM at 7.6.0. Many of you probably have heard of JS DOM. It's like a node implementation of the DOM. We can use it to test browser things without ever having to spin up a browser, which is very slow. If you want to do that, you can use something like Playwright or Puppeteer to do that. Totally valid. What happy DOM is, it's like a minimalistic version of JS DOM, so we don't have to spin up a browser. We can just test everything inside of Node. My advice for you is, for most things, use happy DOM. It's small and fast. It's not a total complete DOM like JS DOM is, but it is much faster. So if happy DOM works, use happy DOM. If it doesn't, then use JS DOM. And then as far as like Puppeteer and Playwright, my suggestion to you about like those full-featured browser environments is have like a few important tests that you run inside of those, and then that's it. Those end-to-end tests are expensive, they're flaky, and so make sure that you're testing really important things. Don't just go willy-nilly on the end-to-end testing. That's just my methodology of testing. Coming from someone that does not like to write tests. If you like writing tests, then by all means tell me to heck off. Okay, so test. We're going to write a function here called test, and it's going to run some vtest for us. We don't have to be any more specific than that. That is it. Fun little trick now, you can write npm run test, right? Or npm run t, or if you're extra lazy like me, npm t will run npm test for you. Oh, am I in the... I bet you I have to do this again. Now npm t is going to say, hey, you don't have any tests. I don't know what to do about that. So that's what you should see. But yeah, fun fact, npm t does npm run test for you. I use that all the time. Okay, one little thing to add to your Vite config. Just in here, write a little test thing, and then you just want to give it an environment of happy DOM. By default, it's going to use JS DOM, which is much slower. I like happy DOM, it's much faster. I like fast tests. Therefore, I'm going to teach you how to write faster tests. All right, so now we are ready to go. We're ready to officially start writing tests. So we're going to write a test for pet.jsx. So here's some just high-level Brian Holt thinks about testing kind of stuff. Try to test functionality, not implementation, which is to say, like, don't test that the hook has the correct value in it. Test the user interface is working the way that a user would expect it to. In other words, try and approach your test like a user approaches your application. If I click a button, I see the thing that I want. Those kind of things. Like, try and tell user stories through your tests. Not always possible. Sometimes you do need to test like the implementation details. But like doing things like extensive spying and mocking and things like that, generally I don't like, because as soon as I want to change the implementation of something to do the same action but a better way, I don't want to have to go change all my tests to test my new implementation. I don't care if my implementation changes. I care if user stories break.
I care if my user story break. That's all, man. That's all. Oh shit. That's all. I only care if my user story break. think it's going to be very, very interesting. I think this is something that's going to take me quite a lot of time.
That's probably a better summation of what I'm trying to say. Every UI I've ever worked on changes all the time, right? We're shipping new headers, we're changing the colors, we're moving the button. Try not to test the UI. If the UI changes, it doesn't mean it broke, it just means it changed, right? So I try not to do that. A fun way of fixing bugs when I can't figure out, like I'm having trouble fixing a bug, is I'll write a test that fails because of that bug, and then I'll try and fix it until that test passes. That has the benefit of guaranteeing myself that I fixed the bug, and I also get to leave a test behind so that that regression doesn't happen again. So that's a lot of my tests come from that. You should be deleting tests on a regular basis. You should get into the habit of deleting tests. If you have bad tests, if you have old tests, deleting tests should be something that you think about, and then fix or delete flaky tests. The only flaky test I tolerate is something like Puppeteer or something like that, or Playwright, where I'm like testing if a user clicks here, fills in these forms, clicks submit, goes here, clicks this, fills this in, and like I'm testing the entire user flow. It's just flaky. Even the best software, even in the best of times, it's a flaky, like Selenium kind of environment. It's still worth it because testing that your user can log in and pay their bill or something like that, it's worth a flaky test to be able to guarantee yourself that that's going to happen. Everything else, if it's flaky, delete it or fix it. One of the two. Okay, that makes sense. That's my high level what I think about tests. I think it's pretty reasonable. I've arrived at that over years of, like I used to work at a company where they did full TDD, right? You would write all of your tests and then you would write the code to fulfill all of your tests. I think it's unnecessary. I think it's unnecessarily slow. I don't think you get any benefit from it. So you can disagree with me and you can just be wrong. It's fine. I'm okay with that. I'm joking for the most part. There's definitely people that would disagree with me on that. So we're going to go into source here, create a directory called __tests __. What's the deal with the double underscore, aka the dunder? I did not make that up. That's what it's called. It's a Python thing. It's a Python thing that means the name of this folder is special. It's magical. It's magical because anything inside of there is assumed to be a test. In other words, if you create that folder, vtest will assume any file that you put in there is a test, and it will run it as part of your test suite. So I can call anything in here blah.js, and vtest is going to assume that blah.js is a test. You don't have to do it this way. The other thing that you can do is outside of this directory, I can create a file called pet.test.js or JSX. If I put .test or .spec in here, both of those will also be assumed to be a test. So either one of those is fine. What do? I do both, because I don't know why, but I just always have. Pet.test.js, which is in the test directory. I can tell you why I do it. I like moving the tests out of the main directory, so I don't have this like super cluttered directory. And then I like putting test in there because now if I search for files, I can just search for test and I'll see all of my test files. That's my reason. Either one of those is fine. One of those is fine, whatever you want to do. You can also just go into your vtest configuration and say, these are my tests, and that works as well. Okay. So pet.test.js, we're going to import, expect, and test from vtest. Import render from @testing_library/react, and import pet from /pet. And sorry, this has to be pet.test.jsx, not JS. Okay, test. Put a useful message here of what it's actually testing. Displays a default thumbnail. Cool. And this takes in an async function. I always make these async because they can be, and I can do a wait in here if I want to. I don't even know if I'm awaiting anything in here. I am, but I always make these async just by default. I'm going to say const pet equals render pet, like that. And then I'm going to say const pet thumbnail should be equals await pet.find by test ID thumbnail. Expect pet thumbnail.src to contain none.jpg. And then with vtest, one of these things that it does, as opposed to jest, which we did not have to do before, vtest is actually going to take your test suite and run it in parallel so it can go even faster. So make sure you're just at the end of this, you're just calling unmount. So you need to clean up after yourself as well. So this is not working yet. That's intentional, just so you know. But this is kind of the methodology that I'm thinking of. I'm going to go render something. I'm going to go find the thumbnail, and I'll talk about this test ID in just a second. And then I'm going to make sure that the source contains none if I don't give it anything. You can imagine that, you know, I get a ticket reported from a user. It's like, hey, you have broken images on your homepage for pets that don't have images. What's up with that? I can go write this test, and then I can go fix it. And now I have a guarantee that I know I have fixed it, and I can just leave this in my testing suite to make sure that it doesn't regress again, right? That's the idea here. Let's go test or talk about this find by test ID. So open your pet.jsx.
It's a use case. It's just a user story here.
JSX pet.jsx here. Here on the the thumbnail here. I want to give this a test ID, so I'm going to give it a
data test.
What is it? Data test ID? Yes. Mm-hmm. Data-test ID equals thumbnail. Now, why am I looking for this rather than using like a CSS selector or something like that? What's nice about using specifically the test ID, one, it expresses this is being tested, right, to a future person that's reading pet.tsx or JSX. It's also saying that later, if I change how this UI works, I can just move what this is attached to, right? Let's say it moved over here. I would just move it over there, and all of a sudden it's testing this instead of testing that. It makes your test work independently of HTML and CSS structure. That's good. It's good to decouple those where possible. Doing data-test ID allows you to do that. Cool. We're getting closer, but we're not quite there. Let's try running npm test and see what happens. I think we're still going to fail. Why is it going to fail? So this already caught a bug for us. Cannot read properties of undefined length. If I don't give it any images, then the images.length there is going to fail because you're trying to call .length on undefined. Cool, I already caught a bug. Let's go fix it. So go back to pet.jsx, and instead of saying images.length, we're going to say images and images.length. Cool. Already caught a bug. Fix that. Run it again. And now it's going to say, hey, I'm trying to run without a router. I don't know how to do that. Why? Link. This, which comes from React Router DOM, depends on a router being above it. We're trying to render it without a router. So in this particular case, what you're going to need to do is you need to come back to your test, and you have to wrap this with a static router. Okay, and then we're going to have to import static router from, and I think it's React Router DOM. Does that work? Or do I have to get it from React Router DOM/server? I think you do. Yeah, okay, React Router DOM/server. This is just like a browser router that can work in Node, right? Because we're not spinning up a browser, so we need it to work in a Node environment. Okay, now I think our test is passing. We wrote our first passing test. Congratulations. We can now be fairly assured that our none.jpg will show up if we don't give it an image. Awesome. So let's make sure that it works with a non-default. So I'm going to say test displays a non-default thumbnail. Just another note for whatever string you put in here. Put the bare minimum amount of text necessary to know what test failed if this is read, right? Don't make it super verbose. Don't give me a novel about it. I don't want to read a novel. I just want to know what test broke. This is me like shadow complaining about former coworkers. I had this one coworker, bless their heart, would write novels. I feel like I'd had to like write a book report afterwards. All right, pet equals render, same thing, static router. We actually probably could have just copied this. So let's do that. Same thing here, except we're going to give it images this time. So 1.jpg, 2.jpg, and 3.jpg. Okay, so now we have a pet. Const pet thumbnail equals await pet.find by test ID. And we're looking for thumbnail again. Expect pet thumbnail.src to contain 1.jpg. Pet.unmount. Oh yeah, this needs to be async as well. Async. Thank you. And there you go. 2 test pass. next section here is going to be testing some UI interactions. So far, we're basically testing, if I give it the correct properties, do I get the correct thing out of it, right? If I give it the correct images, will the user be displayed the right images? Very valid test. Let's go with carousel. If you remember in carousel, I say npm run dev here. Going back over here to my adopt me, I click on Luna. If I click on this one, I expect this image to change, right? If I click on this one, I expect this image to change to that, right? Let's say that we had a regression that a user, every time they click on just the second photo, for whatever reason, that one doesn't work. Let's write a test to make sure that we can click on everything and it works. So please make another file in your test directory, call it carousel.test.jsx. Import, let's make this full screen. Expect and test. One key difference here from Jasmine and Jest, expect and test are not available globally, right? So you do have to import them from vtest.
No, and I love it.
I'm going to argue that that is better because now these have types. And even though I'm not writing these in TypeScript, I still get all the type information from it. I like it better. Plus, it's just better to be explicit about
it's
imports.
more
I don't like
explicit,
globals.
exactly. It's because it's
I think
more
you can set it up so that vtest will make them globally available, but just please don't. Unless you're like migrating from Jest to vtest, yeah, don't do that. You shouldn't do it in Jest either, to be honest with you. But that's behavior that came from Jasmine. Import carousel from /carousel. There we go. Test. Let's users click on thumbnails to make them the hero. Async. Async function.
We're going to test a user story here.
Okay, const images equals 0.jpg, 1.jpg, 2.jpg, 3.jpg, however many of those that you want. I'll leave that at 4. Const carousel, lowercase carousel equals render, and we're going to make a carousel with images equals images. This one we do not have to wrap in our static router because there's no React router stuff inside of carousel. So this is fine as is. Const hero equals await carousel.find by test ID hero. And the first thing we're going to put one expectation here of hero.src to contain images 0, right? So whatever the first one is that we put in here, we expect by default that should be the first thing that we show the user, right? Cool, that's one. Then I'm just going to write a for loop here to just test each one of them individually. So for let I equals 0, I is less than images.length, and I plus plus. Const image equals images I. Const thumb equals await carousel.find by test ID thumbnail I. So I'm going to go and put test IDs on all of these here in just a second. And then I'm going to say await thumb.click. So I'm going to have the browser simulate clicking on that. You have to await it because that's a user interaction. It's not instantaneous. Okay? And then I'm going to say expect hero.src to contain image. And then I'm going to say expect array from thumb.classList to contain active. So what have I done here? What's happening is, where is this? Let me move that. It's going through, and it's going to start clicking on every one of these. So the very first one it's going to click on is this one, right? So that's a valid test to make sure that if I click on the active one, nothing happens, right? Then it's going to click on this one, make sure that this changes. It's also going to make sure that you see how this is grayed out, right? It has the active class on it if we inspect image here. You can see here it has active. The other ones don't have active on it, right? So it's checking to say, does it also get the active class as well? Now, what I'm not doing here, which you probably could write a test that would be just as valid, you could check to make sure that all the other thumbnails do not have the active class on it, right? Because you can imagine some bug where I click this one, then I click this one, but this one doesn't get the active class removed, right? We're not going to do that, but feel free to go and explore that if you want to. And then it's going to do that. So we're going to end up with what, like these 4 assertions. So this is 2 assertions per that, plus this one. So we'll end up with 9 assertions in one test, right? That's pretty cool. Here I didn't do it because I don't think we need to because we don't have multiple tests running here, but you could say carousel.amount as well if you wanted to. Okay, so let's go and put our test IDs in here. So we're going to go to carousel.jsx, to the hero image. Here, we're going to add a data-test ID equals hero. And to each one of these images, we are going to add data-test ID equals thumbnail. And then we need to get that index. Oh, we have the index. So thumbnail index. Okay, and now we should be able to run npm run test. More assertions, all working. Very happy about that. I don't know about you, but every time I write a test, I always try to make sure it's like, what happens if this breaks? Does this fail? So what happens if I forget to put the active class on there? Test fails, right? Put the active class back, test passes. I don't know. This is a pretty compelling test to me, right? Like it's actually going and testing user expectations to make sure that the user expectations are being met. A plus, high fives all
User
around,
expectation, man. User expectations. It's user expectation. What you want to do here is to test is user expectation.
Let's go test a custom hook. Part of the reasons like writing custom hooks is great is
they are very, very testable. Okay, so that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye-bye.